First up is a film called Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. And if you watch the trailer, which I actually really do recommend doing for this one, sometimes I'm like, no, don't watch the trailer, it gives too much away. Or sometimes I'm like, it's not representative of the film at all. I do think the trailer for this gives you a good sense of the general vibe of the film, and there are going to be lots of fun surprises. But I watched the trailer for this movie, and I was like, I need this film to be amazing, which is tough to go in with those expectations, right? And then when you see the film and you want to talk to folks who haven't seen it yet, you don't want to continue to hype it up because you want them to have a good experience too. But I have to say, I think this is going to be my favorite film of the year. I am obsessed with this movie. It is so spectacular. It stars Michelle Yeoh, and it is everything I ever wanted from a Michelle Yeoh performance, and then things I didn't even know I wanted from a Michelle Yeoh performance. At the heart of the story, it's about a Chinese immigrant family who are having trouble with their taxes. That's like the most distilled version of it, I can say, but this film is unhinged in the best way possible. It is the directors called Daniels, their team known as Daniels. It's Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinert, who did Swiss Army Man. They describe themselves as maximalists, and that is, I think, a perfect description of their style. This movie is 2 hours and 20 minutes. It's nonstop. It's amazing. It's kung fu and martial arts and Hong Kong cinema inspired. It's got Wong Kar-wai influence. It has so much humor in it and so much heart. I cried so much into my mask in this film, and I want everyone to see it. So it's got Michelle Yeoh as our protagonist, and she plays, again, a woman called Evelyn who just wants to get her taxes done and just so happens to get sucked into a universe of like multiverse jumping and fighting a great evil. Her husband is played by Quan, who you might recognize from Indiana Jones and the Goonies. Yes, that guy, who is so phenomenal in this. Stephanie Sue plays their daughter. James Hong, who's an absolute legend, plays Evelyn's father. You've got Harry Shum Jr. You've got Jamie Lee Curtis, who is almost unrecognizable in the beginning. You've got Jenny Slate. And I want everyone to see this movie. I call this movie also a Rorschach test because there are so many different themes and you may identify with all of them. You may identify with one in particular, but there's a whole Asian identity, immigrant identity, being a second generation or first generation, parental expectations, just hating taxes in general. There's existentialism. There's also dealing with queer identities. And this movie has everything. And it is such a treat to see a film like this. And again, if you see the reviews, everyone is absolutely gushing over it. And normally I'm like, okay, they're not wrong. They're not wrong. And it's a film that I feel like you can watch over and over and you can get something out of it each time. And, you might watch the beginning and be like, oh, this is almost overwhelming. But the keyword is almost. And I think it's so artfully done. And I want to see more films like this because it's so unique stylistically, but the story at the heart of it is so universal that, we talked about this with Turning Red, but the specificity of the relationship of this family is what makes this film. And then layer on top of it all these amazing style elements. The music is spectacular. The effects, the choreography. I cannot gush about this film enough. I'm also going to try and temper it because I just want you to go see it and enjoy it for yourself. And hopefully you will have as cathartic an experience as I did. And I get very personal about this. I saw this film a week after I'd lost my grandmother, who is a Chinese immigrant. My mom came here with her. They came to this country. So as the child of immigrants, as an Asian American, I had so much going on when I saw this film, and seeing it just sort of unlocked a sense of almost not closure per se, but a sense of catharsis and a sense of like, I'm not alone and other people have similar challenges and issues and deal with similar things. And there's all these things like you don't get to say to your family, or you do, or you regret and all that stuff. And so this film came at a perfect time for me. And I hope that it can do that for you. And even though like I have nothing to do with this film, right? I think it's a gift to audiences. So again, please don't even take it with a grain of salt. Please just go see this movie. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once gets a resounding 5 out of 5 for me. I'd almost give it a 6 out of 5, but I rarely break my scale. So just go see Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. And then the other thing I have this week in what has truly been a really spectacular month for Asian American stories is Pachinko, which is a new series on Apple TV Plus. It's based on the novel by Min Jin Lee, and it also follows a multi-generational story. It follows the story of a woman who grew up in occupied Korea and then moved to Japan. And if you aren't familiar with the history there, Japan occupied Korea for an extensive amount of time. And so there's a whole generation of Koreans who actually grew up in Japan and immigrated there and never actually have been to Korea or had been to Korea. And then, a lot of this happened around World War II. So There was a whole lot of complications with the Japanese there, and there's a lot going on, but we're focusing on the family and multiple generations. The sort of the older version of the protagonist is played by Academy Award winner Yuh-Jung, who won an Oscar for Minari. So you know it's going to be an amazing performance there. And then it's interesting. So I actually just read the book because I knew this was coming. The book is more linear than the series is, and obviously it's an adaptation, and so it's going to do things differently. So the show version of it is following multiple storylines at once, which at first could be a little challenging because they also switch back and forth between Korean and Japanese and occasionally English, and I think the show does a great job of identifying it. But as with everything with subtitles, please just stick with it because you will cry also at this one. I don't know if I laughed as much yet, but I definitely felt very emotional. Again, it's one of those things where the specificity of these characters gives you something to connect to, even if you come from the most different background possible from them. I would say if you have read the book, keep in mind that it is an adaptation, and so it is going to be slightly different. There are tweaks I won't go into specifically, but overall, I think the story is really well done. It's very compelling. All the actors are amazing. You've also got Jin Ha, Lee Min Ho. Again, this is one of those things where I'm like, yes, these stories, we've had Pachinko, Everything Everywhere All at Once, Turning Red, After Yang, and it's not even Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So I can't wait to see what that month brings for us. But I highly recommend both of these things. Again, please see Everything Everywhere All at Once, and please watch Pachinko on Apple TV+.